everyone and welcome to Messy Monday. Today we're going to be using some different products to create some backgrounds for stamping on. We're going to be using gesso, which is a water-based primer which artists use to prime their canvases before painting. We're going to be applying it to some old book paper. Now I've just picked up an old book at a second-hand shop. We're also going to be using some re-inker spritzers, which are the Stampin' Up! Spritzing bottles filled with re-inker and rubbing alcohol. They're really easy to create. I have created a separate video if you would like to check that out before we start. Now, the reason that we're applying gesso to our book paper before we stamp on it is to cover over the text, so we create a distraction-free background for stamping on. But also, because we're going to be applying a wet medium to the paper, which is quite fine, it would likely rip quite easily if we just apply the colour straight to the paper without giving it some sort of surface to give it a bit of tooth. Now I've got two pieces here. Normally I would do probably 6 or so at once. Because you've got all your materials out and you are getting messy, you may as well do quite a few backgrounds up at once and put them away to use later. Before we start, the other things that you are going to need are going to be a paintbrush. This is an inexpensive one, quite a wide paintbrush, and I've just run mine under water. It's a little bit damp, which is going to help us apply the gesso. You might also need, if you've got a lovely manicure or don't want to get your hands really filthy, you might need some rubber gloves because it is quite messy. You'll also need some scrap paper, a little bit of rag just to wipe up any mess, and an old box to spritz in. To start off with, just take some of your gesso and pop it on a palette. I've used an old CD as a palette, and I've just used a palette knife to scrape some out and put onto my CD. And before we start, we're just going to rip down either edge of the paper. For this particular card, we are going to want a nice torn edge on either side. We'll use this piece. Just pick up your gesso with your damp paintbrush, hold on to the bottom and brush up. Now the idea is to get a fairly even layer, but light enough so that you can still see the text. You need to go right to the edges. It doesn't matter so much about the top and bottom because we will be trimming this down. But do try and go right to the edges and just stroke it on until you get a fairly even background where you can still see the text. Okay, now that will take a little while to dry, so we'll just set that aside for a minute. Make sure that you pop your brush into water or wash it out quite quickly. Gesso will come off things because it is water-based, except once it dries on your clothes it won't come off, so wear an apron or an old shirt if you don't want to have white marks all over your clothes. I have a piece that I've done earlier and it's nice and dry now, and we're going to apply the spritzer colour. This is an old box that I use for spritzing in, which just contains the spray. So I've got a tempting turquoise re-inker spritzer here. All spritzers will spray a little bit differently, so you don't want colour all over it, you just want splotches of colour, and try and get some drips in there. Now if you haven't got any drips, you can use the lid, which does have holes in the top. Just pop the lid over the top and spray into that, and that will create some drips for you. And the other colour I'll use is pumpkin pie. Whoops. And you can see how that's reacting with the blue ink. That's the alcohol in the spritzer that's actually causing that reaction. That one's got some nice splotches on it now. So I'll just go away and dry that and I'll come back.